Today's story is about one of Scotland's greatest heroes, William Wallace. But what is he known for? Well, if you've seen the film Braveheart, you may be forgiven for thinking that he was a giant blue furry guy with a really long nose. In reality, though, he was a bit more normal-looking. In fact, we have a couple of official portraits of him, although they were made centuries after he died. And some historians say they're not even that accurate, so this video is going to make use of some artistic license. Anyway, let's get into it. William Wallace was born in the village of Elderslie in the 13th century, probably around the year 1270, although there's some debate over this. What we do know is that he lived during a time when Scotland and England were fighting over who had the right to rule the Scottish throne. The English king at the time was Edward I, also known as Edward Longshanks. Why did they call him Longshanks? No idea, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with his actual height. According to legend, his nickname came from the time he conquered Wales and supposedly pulled the Welsh king's son from his mother's womb and cut off his legs because he was an heir to the throne. Whether that story is true or not, I don't know. But I do know that Edward Longshanks did take over much of Wales and installed himself as the Prince of Wales. Now, whether or not Edward considered himself the true king of all of Scotland is up for debate, but he certainly treated them like it. For example, he seized many of their castles and towns, especially those in the south. And then he ordered them to be heavily guarded by soldiers and locked down so the Scottish people couldn't get them back. This treatment of Scotland didn't go down well. Naturally, most of them wanted their freedom. But what chance did they have? They were vastly outnumbered by the English army. There are two main versions of the story of how William Wallace came to lead the Scottish rebellion. One version says that Wallace was a knight who served under King Alexander III of Scotland, but he was forced to become a commoner when the crown was taken by King Edward I. Disgusted by the corruption of the nobles around Edward, he resigned his position and began fighting against him in secret. Eventually, his fellow Scots found out about his activities and begged him to become their leader. The other version of the story says that Wallace was a farmer whose village was being oppressed by an English lord named John de Walton. After John murdered 3 of Wallace's friends, Wallace went to his local sheriff and demanded justice, but was denied. So he took matters into his own hands and killed John. Soon enough, he was leading a rebel force that sought to end English rule in Scotland once and for all. Which version is true, if either are, is unknown. But one thing that historians do agree on is that Wallace was a skilled fighter and a great tactician. His first major victory was the Battle of the Standard, which took place in 1297. Prior to the battle, a peace treaty between Scotland and England was broken when English forces tried to seize a castle near the Scottish town of Lanark. A Scottish nobleman named John Comyn sounded the alarm, calling for patriots to come and help defend their land. Among them was William Wallace, who led a force of about 400 men to the front lines. Their job was to support the main Scottish force, which was being led by Andrew de Moray. Unfortunately, things didn't go very well for the Scottish noblemen. After attacking the English, they realized that they were vastly outnumbered, so they retreated to the safety of a nearby forest. Here, they hoped to regroup and form a plan of attack. However, before they could do anything, the English charged after them and attacked them in the open field. But just then, Wallace and his men charged into the fight, catching the English by surprise. They fought bravely and helped turn the tide of battle. However, neither Wallace nor Moray was willing to call it a day. So they regrouped again and launched a second attack, which was successful. The English were routed, and the Scottish patriots won the day. The name of the battle would later be changed to the Battle of Stirling Bridge to honor the bravery shown by Scottish infantry, of which Wallace was a part. After this victory, the Scottish nobles wanted to keep fighting, but the rest of the country wanted peace. They felt that the victory at Stirling Bridge was enough, and they wanted to enjoy it while it lasted. They elected a new monarch, John Balliol, who they hoped would bring peace between Scotland and England. However, that same year, Edward Longshanks got wind that he might soon have a rival on the Scottish throne, and he was not pleased. He marched north with his army and forced King John Balliol to abdicate. Then he did something pretty genius. To try and make sure that no Scottish nobleman would ever dare challenge him again, he invited them to a huge feast, where he forced them to swear loyalty to him or his son as their king. At least he didn't try to lock them up this time. But despite Edward's best efforts, his reign in Scotland was not going well at all. Rebels rose up everywhere, and he had to put down these uprisings while also trying to secure the northern parts of his kingdom. Meanwhile, William Wallace continued to be a thorn in his side, inflicting embarrassing defeats wherever he could. In response, Edward set out to capture Wallace, dead or alive. On September 11, 1298, Edward's troops caught up with Wallace's men at the Mercat Cross, and the battle began. Wallace and his men fought fiercely, but their numbers were low, and the English archers were relentless. To make things worse, Wallace's horse was shot out from under him. But still, he fought on foot until his sword broke. Finally, he was forced to flee. Unfortunately, he didn't get far. We're not exactly sure how he was captured, but we do know that he was betrayed by one of his fellow Scottish nobles, Sir John Monteith. Why he did it isn't clear. Maybe he was tired of the war, or maybe he was hoping that the English would reward him for his service. Either way, when Wallace was handed over to the English, he was taken to the nearest jail in the town of Berwick. There are many legends surrounding Wallace's final days. Some say that when he was brought before the judge, he punched him in the face and said, "This is my answer to your judgment." Others say that when he was offered a noble's death, meaning death by sword while standing up, he refused it, saying, "I will die on my feet." However, these stories are likely legends created in the aftermath to make Wallace seem more heroic. What we do know is that he was taken to London and executed on August 23, 1299. Some sources say that he was hanged for treason, but others say that he was executed for killing an Englishman, which was technically true. Either way, his head was cut off and hung from London Bridge to warn other potential traitors of the fate that awaited them. However, his body didn't stay there for long. That night, his friends broke him down from the gallows and returned him to Scotland, where he was given a hero's funeral. Sadly, not much is known about the rest of his life or the circumstances of his death. All we have are these few legends and tales told about him by bards and storytellers. However, his legacy lived on. People still tell his story today, and he remains a symbol of hope and courage for the Scottish people. And thank you for watching.